Alrighty, we'll get started so we can stay on time. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Concurrent Session 4B, looking at physio and exercise. We're going to start with a video first from Joanne Levitt, and then we're going to move on to Ryan Black. Now, I'm going to introduce Ryan now. Ryan's currently working at the Queensland Children's Hospital and has been working with people with cystic fibrosis for over 20 years and across 3 centres. He's currently the respiratory physiotherapy lead at QCH. Personally, I've been lucky enough to know Ryan for 15 years, way back when we were both heaps younger and heaps hotter than we are now. And when I asked my son how I was going to introduce Ryan today, he said, one word, annoying.
And I'll introduce Jo, who's I work with, who's not annoying, so we'll start with her.
Hello, everyone. Do I just use this to go forward and back and so forth? Big button. The big button. Okay, great. Thank you, everyone, for coming to this session today. I just wanted to show you something that we've created at Children's Hospital, and hopefully you will all enjoy it. So, when I work in the CF clinic, I'm often coming across parents of young toddlers and preschoolers that sometimes are finding it hard to transition from using manual techniques to PEP therapy, or even while they're using the PEP, having some issues with that. So sort of thought, well, how can we help support this in terms of education and thinking about children's health literacy and how they learn. And so we did a needs analysis with some families to find out, whether or not a short animated video would be the way to go. And if we did produce one, sort of what age group would it be applicable for? And you can see it really did target that preschool age, but even some over 5. And then I asked sort of what techniques, and of course, you can see pretty much all airway clearance techniques and exercise, but certainly PEP was one of the ones, and 100% of people that were interviewed agreed that if we did something around PEP, that would probably help encourage their children in participating in their airway clearance at home. So we did then produce a video, and we got some consumer input in terms of what the content was going to be, the characters and so forth, both from consumers and also from the MDT, other like nursing, occupational therapy, physio, and even music therapy. And so prior to showing the video to our consumers, we just wanted to see what they felt that their child's knowledge was about airway clearance and about why they were doing physiotherapy. And you can see probably half of them felt that their children did understand, and probably just a little bit more than half either didn't or felt that maybe they did, but not 100% sure. And they... Most people agreed that to their knowledge, there weren't a lot of visual resources available to help support this education, but they agreed that it would be really important that the child did understand why they were doing what they're doing. And the same sort of things came across in the clinician pre-survey, but the clinicians also said that they would definitely use it as a tool within their clinic to help support that education as well. So I'll just get straight to it. So this is the video, and we're going to play it now.
Spotty's here! Hi Spotty, I have to finish my PEP breathing before we can play. What's PEP? It helps keep my lungs healthy. PEP stands for positive expiratory pressure, but everyone just calls it PEP. It helps to open my lungs and get air behind any mucus. Some kids use a mask and others use a mouthpiece like me. Why do you have to do physio and I don't?
Do you remember last week, Kanga was coughing a lot? Kanga has cystic fibrosis. Thick mucus in the lungs can block the breathing tubes, so we need to clear them.
When my breathing tubes are clear, my body is ready to play and do all the things I love to do, like soccer and karate. Lots of kids do physio for their lungs. Do you have to do it every day, even if you don't have a cough? Yeah, it's just like cleaning my teeth, but for my lungs. When I was little, Mum did pats on my chest. When I got a bit older, she added vibrations. Sometimes we use them when I do PEP too. And Mum, do you remember when you used to do airplanes with me and bounce me on the ball? I loved that.
They're called acceleration activities. And when you are older, you might learn new breathing exercises.
Exercise gets the mucus moving too.
So do bubbles and party blowers, but we huff and cough to clear it.
That looks like fun. Hooray, now it's time to play. I'll race you to the trampoline.
And keeping active is something important we all need to do. You and me too.
So we kept it short, one because of a child's attention span at that age is pretty, we've got to keep it short and sweet, and also because of the cost involved. But we just sort of felt we'd try to cram as much as we could in without making it too crazy. So after we, after we produced this, we showed it to some parents and caregivers, and 100% agreed that they would find it useful to help with their children, and to having a role model like Kanga could be really helpful in helping their child to actively participate in airway clearance. And everyone expressed that they would really like to see more resources like this, if possible, for their child. There was a bit of a wish list. I won't read it all out, but obviously there's certain things that potentially we could work on for the future. And we were also cognizant that, when I first started this whole idea, it was before modulators were available for that 2 to 5 year old age group in Australia. And obviously not every child might be doing daily airway clearance from now on, or things like that. But some children it is still indicated clinically for them to do it daily. And there's also no clear evidence at the moment to change clinical practice. And Ryan will talk a little bit more about things like this. But certainly it's a great way to initiate conversation with your child, or it's not necessarily yours, but for people with CF, with their children. And also a great way, like if you had to re-engage a child back into doing some physiotherapy during times of not being so well, it could be a really great resource to use at that time. We really hope that it's normalising and inclusive of airway clearance and health and wellness strategies that can really help children to be able to do the things that they love to do. And we can also potentially use it in other respiratory conditions because, as Kanga says, lots of kids do physio for their lungs. Thanks very much.
All right, I'll jump into my talk. Hit the big button. So just acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land that we're meeting on today. Can I have a quick poll in the room? I don't know everyone's situation and scenario, but who thinks physio was important, say, up till 3-4 years ago in CF? Well, we were slow to get there, but yes, good. Who thinks it's important now and into the future? All right, I'm preaching to the converted, that's good. So again, not knowing everyone's situation, but what's the first thing that comes into your mind when you think of physio? Just dwell on that for a second. You don't have to yell it out. So, dread. I'll start with the negative, but then quickly go to opportunity, because we know physio has improved outcomes traditionally for patients with CF and has afforded many great opportunity. Is it fun? If it's not, then we've probably failed in our endeavour to teach children and even adults and families that physio can actually be fun. Healthy, does that come to mind? Because it should, because it keeps you healthy. Sick, it may actually remind you that you are sick, because the intensity of physio in hospital, I'm sure, is a reminder that you is unwell. Hospital is a reminder that you're unwell. Is it just airway clearance? Is it just your PEP or your hypertonic saline or your bronchitol? Or is it something a bit different? And we're going to hear about this next, shortly after me. which I'm looking forward to, about exercise being a wonderful aspect of physio. And is it important? Yes, we've established that. So historically, from a physio point of view in Australia and many countries around the world, we have a fair body of evidence. And in Australia, we have a guideline that guides physios working with people with CF. And it goes into great detail about a lot of things. But our main pillars are inhalation therapy, airway clearance, which you could call one and the same, and exercise. I'll probably just at this point tell a story. Sometimes our patients, whatever treatment we prescribe, don't always follow the advice. And they create pathways of their own, which in some ways is fine, in others you have some interesting outcomes. But I looked after, this is 20 years ago now, when we're all much younger and more attractive. I looked after a patient, let's call him Sam, and it was the first time he tried the highly effective medication at the time called hypertonic saline. Yes, water and salt, very complex. And his face changed in the 15 minutes he nebulised hypertonic saline, and he was rapt, because this was new to him. He was probably 22, 24, and just his face lit up. And Sam was a fairly, his personality was quite reserved, didn't say a whole lot. Anyway, that was in the morning. In the afternoon, came to see him in hospital again, and he was tucked under the covers of his bed, didn't want to talk, and we eventually worked out, we asked him, what's wrong? And he goes, I have a shocking headache, like the worst I've ever had. And we're like, oh no, hypertonic didn't go to plan. What are we going to do now? Because he was so thrilled that morning. And we just questioned a little bit further, and we're like, well, what do you think it was? And he said, well, I actually nebulised the whole bottle. As you left, you normally do about 5 mils. He did about 150 mils and proceeded to give himself the worst headache he'd ever had, which in this day and age, with highly effective medications that you've all well and truly aware of, we need the precision of, the research has been done, but we need the precision to keep going and find out what the optimal care is. And sometimes doing more isn't better. Just a quick plug. I'm sure you're all, for those with CF in the room and families, are thankful for their physios. Quite a few in Australia have developed this resource. It's called cfphysio.com. If you don't know about it, go and look it up. And lots of resources for physios and for patients and families with CF. I won't say any more. You can. So we're now at the point in the modulator era where the most frequent questions we get asked as physios is, well, why do I have to do it? And just a heads up, I'm actually not doing it, so deal with that. Our patients do feel great, and we are very thankful for that. And for some parents and for some adults, they go, well, what elements can I change? And I probably prefer that approach compared to the first one there. And you need to ask these questions, and your physio and multidisciplinary teams need to be able to answer some of these questions. We probably can't answer them all at the minute, but give guidance, give the evidence, and give recommendations why physio is, as it always was, is still important, why some of it may change and can change. And we need to maintain that conversation. One of our fears as physios and members of the team is that we stop having those conversations because we're feeling great. We may not see you anymore. And that is just something that's sitting with us as treating teams. So as we look currently and into the future, I just wanted to, there's probably a few words there, probably could have made that simpler, but just say that it's a matter of perspective for each individual, and we always talk about individual care, everyone's experience is individual, and I was going to use some case examples, but I wouldn't have had enough time, just to highlight that everyone is different age. Some are on medication, some are not. Some respond to it, some don't. So there's no one absolute pathway that we can say do this, do that. Everyone is an individual. And probably the bottom dot point on that top section, one of the things we're very mindful of, are we just shifting things in time? Are we shifting the deterioration in lung function further down the track? And that we don't know, but that's one thing that we're very mindful of and cautious of. And I've talked about individualised care there a bit. So just a few studies, none of them are particularly, or some of these are not pure physio, as in this one, but it's where physio interplays, and there's a bug swooping me. So this is a study that looked at those on just ivacaftor and gives us a little bit of warning in that, I won't go, you may be aware of it and you might have heard of it already, but initially, we had, before starting on ivacaftor, and just the great improvement straight away, but then over 5 years, a fall, and at the same rate, doesn't have the data before, but at the same rate, people's lung function was falling before they started on the medication. So that tells us, and they looked at a few things, and this fairly not accurate, but medicine possession ratio, which tells you, are you picking it up, are you using it? That started to fall off in a highly effective medication. So it tells us a few things, that we can't change too many treatments too quickly, and that adherence to these medications is as important as any other medication, because in this group of patients, again, not triple therapy, just singular therapy, they had a worsening outcome, and that's not what we're after. In this study, so 79 patient study on triple therapy, and it looked, this is quite a nice study, it looked at the properties of sputum before and after starting on Trikafta, and generally everything improved drastically, which is great, that's what we're after. But a small warning, 2 minutes left, is that it doesn't come up to the healthy points here. So we have healthy points there, here. So it's a lot better, but it's not normal. Just quickly, Pseudomonas. We all know about Pseudomonas. So it improved. So red down here, it improved, but it's not going away. So that to physios and to doctors is still a concern because we know the damage it can do to the airways. Another study, this is looking at lung function, starting triple therapy. Massive improvement, that was great. And they discontinued either hypertonic saline or Dornase alpha, and this study is actually continued on now, so this is their initial results. But over a 6-week period, their lung function didn't drop significantly, beauty. But again, another small concern is there are a number of respiratory adverse events, some serious, most fairly mild to moderate, but they're still happening. And does that, over time, continue to cause the lung damage that we're all well aware of? And lastly, a study in Scotland looking at modifying what traditional physio is, and we all know exercise in itself is important, but can it replace the more mundane aspects of physiotherapy, which is, and again, this was a short-term study and it was mainly looking at safety. Can we safely do this? And it in itself is going on to do a longer-term study, but it is safe to purely rely on exercise in a majority of patients for their physio. So So I might just summarise now. I've probably got a few slides that I need to get through. But the summary points is we need to maintain contact with patients with CF to make sure they're not getting worse. And some of our measures that we've traditionally relied on are probably not, they don't pick up the subtleties very well. And that's, we talk about spirometry and lung function. This whole weekend we've talked about other outcomes that can help us. So there's room to improve there. We're constantly wanting to keep patients at their baseline. Now that might mean something different to each person, but I see a patient with CF's baseline is their absolute best, their most optimal state. And that's what, as physios, we're doing our best to keep you at that level. And just to plug, all of the modulator, the research done in modulator therapy was done on patients doing standard care. So the minute you drop the standard care, you may not actually be at your most optimal state. And that is one thing that the message we're trying to say now. Probably to finish off, Joe and I and every physio that attended here this weekend, we're in full agreement that things for CF patients can change, but we have to do it following the evidence, which we don't have much at the minute. We have to do it in a strategic way, not a let's just dump everything and hope for the best. And we need to do it in a conversation, like I said before, where we're constantly informing our patients, not sitting there hoping for the best, like I said before. Quick focus on exercise. Exercise is not just important in CF, it's important across society. So that's probably one of the major focuses that you'll talk with physios about as patients. And some of the research shows from a young age, we may be replacing exercise as a therapy and replacing it with very sedentary behaviour, like this baby on the right. We don't promote that. I might leave it there and we'll hear from the next two speakers. And just to finish, physios are a committed group and a persistent group of individuals, and we will continue to be like that, even if it means we're annoying to our patients. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe Thanks, Joe and Ryan. That was great. I wish Kanga was around when I was diagnosed. It's now my pleasure to introduce Rory Morgan. Rory is the first person with CF to complete the Ultraman 3-day triathlon. I'm tired just reading that. However, it's not about the first being for Rory. It's about paving the way for the future generations to break the boundaries with CF and self-belief.
Hello? Oh, cool. Oh, I'm loud. That's scary. Hey, I'm Rory Morgan, 30. I've got cystic fibrosis. I appreciate you all listening to me speak today about my Ultraman journey. I'm a bit stoked. I don't have to talk about my whole life. So we'll just start from when I became an adult, basically, and before I got to that start line of that race to represent people with cystic fibrosis. And everyone else in this room who also supports cystic fibrosis. So I had surgery in that on my knee when I was 20 years old. Stopped playing football, stopped doing all the physiotherapy. Not that I stopped, but becoming an adult and working and things changing, you know. I was quite healthy and didn't think those things were as important anymore. And I went on to, get my surgery, and Mum sort of said, what are you going to do next in your life? You know, you have to do something to keep physiotherapy up, stay healthy, clear your lungs. She's done the 10K every year at the Gold Coast Marathon for, 10 years or so. Anyway, so she invited me to do that, and I struggled massively. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. I've never run 10Ks. And from there, my life just, I got good clearance out of that, and I suppose I got a little bit addicted to the challenge of pushing my body to the limits that, CF maybe try to hold me back from, which I don't really believe in. So yeah, from there I signed up to half marathon for 6 months later, and then I looked at a triathlon. I don't know anyone that's done a triathlon prior to me doing my first. I had no community in that regard. I was just doing park runs and things like that to keep fit on weekends. And I did my first Olympic distance triathlon at Robina. I had swum at school. I'd done swimming as a sport and, AFL and a lot of sport growing up. So I was athletic, but not good at anything. And that's why you choose triathlon, because instead of sucking at one sport, you might as well suck at three. So, I did that first triathlon. It was, I found out that my biggest issue was cramping, losing so much salt over 3 or 4 hours of exercise. That is my biggest issue. Obviously, there was a lot of clearance in the lungs in that, swimming 1.5 kilometres and riding and running and all that sort of stuff. But cramping was my big issue. For the next 5 or 6 years, I just slowly stepped it up. I won't go through all the things I did. So I did. I then got invited by CFQ to do the Noosa Triathlon through their wave. I did that 6 years in a row or 5 years in a row. I really enjoyed that. Obviously, being the biggest triathlon in the Southern Hemisphere, it was quite exciting, good atmosphere. But every single one of those races, 4 out of 6 of those races, I actually couldn't run the run. I spent the second half of the run walking every single time because I just used that much salt and was cramping. So I was trying to make races bigger, but sort of struggling with that part of my journey, trying to get more salt in because I did a sweat test and was losing 3,000 milligrams per hour or something like that. I can't remember. It was a while ago I was doing these figures. And I was like, well, that's like 30 salt tablets over that long. Like that, that's a long time with the training and all that. And, that's like drinking seawater. And when you drink seawater, you get a crook gut. So you just try to balance these things. And that's what I was trying to do. And then someone said to me, you've got to give the Ironman a go. And at that point, Lisa Bentley was the only person with cystic fibrosis that had done an Ironman. She was diagnosed at 25, I believe. So she was the first person with CF to do an Ironman. So I thought I'd take on that challenge and see if I could aspire to that level. And that was in 2018, and 2019, sorry. I trained for the whole year of 2019, ready to do the race, and then obviously through everything that happened in the world, it got cancelled 3 times. So I got really fit. It was actually probably the most fittest I've ever been because really fit, race was pushed back 3 months. I'd start the block again, cancelled, start the block again, cancelled. Anyway, I got the opportunity to do that in 2021, the Ironman. Knocked it over in 13 hours. I was pretty happy. But once again, I cramped. And this was, I literally just started Trikafta 2 weeks before the race, so I can't bring that part of my journey into that race at that stage. But I'd had the purge at that point that we discussed, and I was probably in pretty good shape. Only been on Trikafta for a couple of weeks or what have you. So, but anyway, I got the Ironman done, and I sort of thought that was, the end of the journey. A lot of people aspire to the Ironman, and it's an extremely difficult race if you ever take the challenge yourself. But then someone said, there's this race, and only 50 people get invited per year. It's an international race, so there's one in Canada. I think Quebec has one, or Israel has one, and then America has a couple, which is the Ultraman. And that's a 3-day event. I've got a little 3-minute video montage at the end to show you like a visual representation of what it was like. Everything looks flat. It wasn't flat. The video doesn't do it justice. But at this point, Trikafta? Is that the one? Yep, that had changed. Sorry, a lot of drugs. That had changed my life. So I didn't realise how sick I was before that drug. As Ryan was discussing with, do I need to do physio anymore? I was like, I probably went to the other end of the spectrum and was like, right, how much harder can I go now that I'm probably not going to cramp as much? So that's when I started doing ultras and all that sort of stuff. So I put in an application in 2022 for Ultraman. As I said, they only take 50 people on per year. And it got all the way to, the race is in May, so it got all the way to November and I hadn't had an invite and I was getting pretty upset because I was like, oh, well, I'm not very good. Didn't make it, I tried my best. I got a good story. I thought I'd be a great athlete for it. And then I was at a cafe with a friend and luckily enough, this email comes through and it was like, hey, Rory, you have an outstanding payment for your Ultraman. You've still not done it. We invited you 2 months ago. It must have gone to junk. I don't know what happened. Anyway, I got really emotional. I was like, oh, God, because I was going to Tassie with my partner Sam in a couple of weeks for a holiday, and training was not really on the cards because after big events, I usually have a bit of chill time, which, I had to learn that over the years instead of doing more, and getting really fatigued with work and university and things like that. So, yeah, I got this invite to this race. At that time that I got the invite, I was still working full-time in construction, civil construction. I'd done that for 10 years. And I was about to start my final year of university, which was full-time study as a paramedic. And there was a lot of things happening in that time. We were in Tasmania talking about how I was going to manage that. So we sold our investment property, which could have set us up for maybe a better future. But anyway, it's done is done now. Done is done. It wasn't all about the race, We just made that. It's an opportunity to come up, and it might not ever come up again. And who knows? If I did get sick, I might not get the opportunity to do that ever again. So we bit the bullet, did that. I left work quit work for the year. So I'm back in civil construction again now, waiting for a job as a paramedic. But left my job in January and started training. So I had 16 weeks to get ready to do this race, which involves a 10-kilometre swim, a 420-kilometre bike ride, and an 85k run, like a double marathon on the last day. So, yes, a little bit. But the hardest part with CEF, obviously, is the cramp. It's not the fitness for me, unfortunately, which a lot of people, that is the fitness to get there. But for me, it's like, how do I eat? How do I keep my lungs clear? And how do I keep going? How do I stop the cramps? So I got a coach. His name was Greg. He's, great bloke. And started working with the martyr, explaining, look, this is what I'm going to do. How do I get this? Obviously, I feel way better. I think I'd done a marathon at that point, in 2022, and I didn't really cramp, obviously, because of tricafter and that. So I was like, right, I've got it. And this has probably helped inspired me joining up to this race. So Greg set me out a 16-week plan. And from there, I ramped up from the first week was 11 hours training, and then the second last week was 11 hours on a Wednesday among the 26 hours that I trained for that week. So a lot of effort, put it in, and then, got to the start line of the race. Quite enjoyable. Cried a lot at the start line. I don't cry at finish line of races. I cry at the start line because I'm probably more proud that I got there in the first place, and whatever happens at that point. So, yes. Only 50 people. It's very different to a lot of races. You're not just a number in a crowd. It's a quite personal experience, and I saw this race like this as well because you actually have a crew. There's no aid stations. So what they do is your crew in the vehicle, they will leapfrog you. So you'll do, obviously not in the swim, there's a canoe, but it's family and friends, and they'll be in the vehicle with your stuff, and you meet them at checkpoints throughout the race and get your gear. So Dad was the kayaker for the swim, and he got cramps. So we were swimming Noosa Beach. You swim all the way around Hell's Gates, all the way back past Noosa River, and then all the way back. At 7.5k, I'd had enough. Swimming, I'd had enough of swimming at that point. I was ready to give it up. So we knocked it out. Dad was super proud, obviously got cramps, and then I don't think the photo's going to be in there, but one of the outstanding photos is I'm coming up the beach with all my gear, getting ready to go onto the bike for the first day, and here's this canoe capsized behind me and Dad's head bobbing because he's gone into the waves at Noosa in like a fishing kayak and got overturned. Anyway, first day is 150k bike ride, and my crew, unfortunately, good blokes, can't blame them for it. I have my own titrated drinks from Infinite, if anyone's heard of that. It's a brand for personalised supplements. So they keep osmolarity down so that you can digest this much electrolytes, carbohydrates without getting stomach issues. So did that. They only did half doses. And I was like, I'm feeling a bit salty. So I got to like 140 k's on the ride, and I was like, something's not right. This water, it tastes like water, Anyway, we fixed that. Day 2 rolled around, and that went really well. That was fun, day 2. So I was in like 35th position on day 1. Day 2 rolled around, and I ended up in like 17th position. It went so well. It was 270k bike ride. Really enjoyed it. But I was most anxious about day 3, as I've explained. Running, cramps, horrible. So woke up early in the morning. We did the run. In the run, you have someone with you the whole time. So you have a pacer. they carry your gear so you don't have to carry it. So they're carrying my flasks, they're carrying my food, and we all day did sweet potatoes, salty chips, croissants, bananas, just everything with sodium, electrolytes, and then obviously my drink mix. The only thing to come out of that day, which was pretty funny, was my crew car was my dual cab Hilux, and my brother filled it up with petrol at the 40k mark. So I ran from 40 to 60 Ks, and I was running, I'm like, God damn, I'm getting dehydrated. This is all going to not good. And this Elantra comes up the road. I was like, who is it? It was my crewmates, they just put everything in a different car. My brother sucked all the petrol out of the Hilux and filled it back up with diesel. No issues with the car. But anyway, so I ended up finishing Ultraman, and obviously I was the first to finish in the world, but as I said, as I was introduced, it wasn't about me finishing Ultraman or coming 17th or anything like that. It was about setting the precedence for the next generation of cystic fibrosis, and that with gene modulators, there's a lot of achievable things, and in continued physiotherapy, you will achieve more than, you set out to do. So I've got a little couple-minute video here to show the race, but yeah, thanks for your time, guys. Appreciate it. I didn't choose the songs for this either. This was made for me, so song choice is not me. Here he is, here he is.
There's the man.
2, 1, go!
Go, Rory. Go, Rory. Be safe, mate. Here we go. Here we go.
Well done, Warriors. And dear Rory Morgan, of course, out of Brisbane. Congratulations.
Let's go. Yeah.
Couple more hills and we're home.
Day 3, 2 Maras back to back. That's yours, bro. You fucking done it! It's yours, Hazel. Let's go. Alright, Rory, let's go, mate.
Rory Morgan for the line. The 30-year-old from the Gold Coast. All you.
I hope I'm just the first, I hope there's many more to follow me, and if they crack the under 30, I'll be stoked because it'll give me a reason to come back. So, no, thank you very much, everyone, and yeah, hope to see you all again.
Under pressure. Under pressure.
that was a bit spectacular, wasn't it? All I could think of was move over, Nathan Charles. I've got someone else to idolise now. And look out, Ryan, you've got a bigger job to do. I want to see my son up there doing that. I'd like to take the opportunity to welcome Lizzie Van Dongen up now. Lizzie is a musculoskeletal physiotherapist and Pilates instructor living with cystic fibrosis. Lizzie is interested in therapeutic benefits of exercising with helping to manage CF. Lizzie is extremely passionate about helping others to live a life without doubt or disease. Please join me with welcoming Lizzie.
I feel like I'm on such a high from your speech, Rory. That was honestly just so phenomenal, and yeah, I feel giddy with excitement at watching something like that, and I think it just shows the potential for people with CF to live a life unencumbered by the disease, which is what we could hope for everyone. So hopefully there'll be a little bit of something in here for everyone. I think probably a lot of the messages won't be new, but perhaps just a different take on them. So exercise. I think I'd love to just start by acknowledging the diversity of experiences and the views that we all have with exercise. For the Rorys in the world, it is the reason we get out of bed in the morning. We feel our blood pumping, we put on some good music, we get moving, and our day begins on the best note. But for the other half of us, it's like that joke where you ask the guy who's banging his head against the wall, well, why are you banging your head against the wall? And he just said, because it feels so good when I stop. Regardless of our perspective, the one thing that does unite us is that we are here. And in this room, at a conference about cystic fibrosis, all of us know what a privilege it is to be here. And with that privilege, there comes a responsibility that we take care of our bodies and that we do whatever is within our means to make life that little bit easier for them. So, exercise. As you are all very aware, there's a lot of different types of exercise, and they each come with their own unique benefits. And if we take a sort of macro view, we can probably divide these types into about 3 core types. So we've got our resistance training, and I like to think of that like our bulletproofing. It's the stuff that helps us build strong muscles and bones, and we know, as we've heard today by many people, that people with CF have lower bone mineral densities, or they can be more prone to that. It also increases our healthy energy reserves, and it can prevent injuries. So we've got different types of weighted exercise, body weight, resistance bands, paddle sports that can serve that purpose. And then we have our aerobic exercise, and I like to think of this like our magic cape. It helps us do things that we want to do just with that little bit more ease. So we know that it increases our lung function, it increases our ease of movement, it increases our endurance, can help loosen secretions, and we can sort of divide it into weight-bearing exercise, like your running, skipping, trampolining, anything where you have impact, or you can also have your non-weight-bearing exercise, like the cycling and the swimming. The bonus of the weight-bearing exercise is that it does help with bony turnover, which is just another extra little bit of bulletproofing for our bones. And then we've got our mobility exercises, and they can help keep us agile and limber. They can help with our posture-related pain. Stretching is the way that we can achieve this. Various physio tools can help us with that as well. And the other thing I just thought I'd add in there is exercises for our pelvic floor. So we know that there can be an increase in incontinence, either stress or urge incontinence for people with CF. And we can do specific exercises for this, or also our Pilates is a nice double whammy. So along with the types of exercise, we also have a few other parameters that we can adjust to help us find the right fit. And the fit standing for the frequency, so how often we're exercising, the intensity, how hard or how gentle it is, the type, as we've just discussed, and the duration or the time. And just a side note on intensity, sometimes it can seem like a bit of a foreign language when we're told to do moderate activity, and finding out what that means can be difficult. So that's where you've got, this is just one version of the kind of tool that could help us, but something like your rating of perceived exertion scale, which sort of quantifies that moderate activity into the kind of activity where you're breathing heavily, but you can still hold a conversation, and so on. And there's a lot that we could dive into there, but we will leave it there. So how do you know what you need? Well, your care team is the best starting point, and I think I don't need to say anything more than you can refer to Ryan's talk and all that he included in that as to why they are the best people to help you with this. But we also know, as has been the theme of the day as well, that there is this shift to a more preventative model of care for later in life. As we are enjoying the privileges of ageing, they come with a few accessories. So we also know that exercise can help with things like CF-related diabetes, CF-related bone disease, cardiovascular disease, and the changes in body composition that we're seeing as well. And I wasn't quite sure whether to be flattered or insulted when I was showing this to my gorgeous Nan, who's in the audience, and she went, "Oh, geez, is that you up there, Liz?" That isn't me. But these next few slides are pretty information dense, and I've only put them up here as the purpose of showing you that these resources are out here. So don't feel like you have to delve into them. But they're just slides from the Australian Guide for Physical Activity. So it's basically highlighting that there are specific recommendations that we have that can put you in the ballparks of the types and amounts of exercise that we should be having over our lifespan, and that our needs change as we grow. So for the little guys, movement is all about developing skills, learning new position, postures, movements, and exploring. For the school-aged kids, again, it's like developing our skills, such as our coordination, can be helping develop our healthy bones, and we start to incorporate more of an aerobic component and some strengthening and just trying different things. For the adults, it's kind of just about doing it. So making time to continue doing moderate intensity activity. It's that real preventative approach and setting us up for the future, thinking about our superpowers. But we can also use exercise to enhance our overall well-being, that being mental, physical and emotional. It can help us to regulate our mood, to generate positive hormones, to help manage stress. And movement can just be such a beneficial way to connect, and whether that's with ourselves, whether that's with nature, our families, our loved ones, or our communities. And then as we get older, it's a move it or lose it type of situation. So we need to keep challenging things like our balance and our aerobic capacity and our strength just to maintain it. It goes without saying, but it gets a little bit effortless to maintain elite figures such as this. And now we get into the exciting stuff, the way that new treatments and research are changing the role of exercise in CF. But before I move on, I would just love to acknowledge that not all of us with CF are fortunate enough to be on a modulator, and everybody's experience with these modulators can be so varied. For where we are now, though, this information is promising for all of us. It is real proof that the time, the energy, and the resources are being invested in our disease. And it's my greatest hope and expectation that as the research continues to grow and develop, that we will see the development and inclusion of therapies for everyone with CF. So, how are modulators changing the role of exercise? We know that they're changing activity levels, but not necessarily exercise capacity. In order to do that, we need to exercise. But they certainly are reducing our barriers to exercise. Patients are reporting having more energy, they're coughing less, they're less short of breath, and they can be less fatigued. And this can increase our confidence to participate in exercise. For me, I wouldn't have dreamed of going to a yoga class prior to Trikafta for fear that no one would be able to hear the instructor over my coughing and sniffing, but it's something that's now an opportunity for me to go to because I don't have the symptoms. There probably came a point as well, especially during my adolescence, where I was pretty sports mad and I loved soccer, but it was getting to the point where I was coughing up so much during my games. I was developing a bit of a reputation. But we also know that without these modulators are potentially reducing our symptom and treatment burden as well, and that increases time in our days. And we're also seeing exercise being used as a way to detect changes in disease. So previously, a lot of the things that we are now a lot of the symptoms we're now noticing are decreasing, we used, like the colour, the type, the thickness in sputum. But now these aren't happening, and so we're looking to things like exercise testing and things like that to see how we can monitor our changes. So, the million-dollar question, can exercise replace airway clearance? And if we look to the research, it's really important to acknowledge that this isn't a new question, but we know that it's a question people with CF care about because we know people with CF exercise. But what we don't know is whether it's okay to replace airway clearance with exercise. And it's mainly because we don't know if exercise is as good as airway clearance. So historically, prior to modulators, older studies concluded that exercise was a beneficial adjunct. We'd get a bit of vibration happening, we'd loosen secretions, it'd make it easy to cough stuff up. We'd do our pre and post exercise treatments, and it'd be the dream package. But then later studies looked at what would happen if we included a huff or a forced expiration. Would that complement it enough? And a little shameless plug as well, for those who don't know what a good huff looks like or how to achieve a good one, the CF Physio is a really great resource for being able to enable that. So studies looked into basically if we were going to say that exercise could replace airway clearance, what kind of exercise do we recommend? And they basically found that it needed to be aerobic exercise, that it was at the intensity to elicit deep breathing, it needed to be for longer than 20 minutes, and it was mainly looked at in weight-bearing exercise, stuff that induced that body vibration, also swimming, and including assessment huffs and breaths. So with a survey that collected data saying this is the most likely to be beneficial, we had enough to run a trial. And the preliminary results, as Ryan mentioned, were that for 28 days it appears to be safe to replace exercise with airway clearance with exercise during times of stable CF. And this was for people with a lung function of over 40%. But the emphasis really needs to be that this is just a preliminary study and that long-term follow-up is needed. We are hopefully going to live a lot longer than 28 days, and we want to make sure our treatment sets us up for that. So one step at a time, it's a basically watch this space sort of scenario. Fill out the surveys that come into your inbox and ask you questions, because without those, we wouldn't have research being done. If you are already doing aerobic exercise for more than 20 minutes at a moderate intensity, include a huff. You'd kind of be crazy not to, but make sure you consult your care team and ask them how studies like this impact you and what that can mean for your care regimes. And I was going to jump into a bit of putting it into practice, but I feel like I run out of time. So I will leave it there. Thanks.
Ryan and Rory, can I ask you to just come up and we'll have some Q&As. As a person with CF, I feel like I'm in a room of legends. Like, oh my goodness, Rory and Lizzie, you guys are just amazing. And Rory, I've got cramps just listening to your story. And for me, when I was diagnosed in 1971, exercise was off the table. We were told not to exercise. And you look at these two guys and they're just amazing. I think it's really imperative that parents with CF children actually enforce exercise, because you can obviously see the benefits here. So we're going to do Q&A. I'm going to start off with a question. Sorry, Ryan, this is at Rory and Lizzie. As a person with CF myself, how do you stay motivated to exercise every day? And I mean, you know, like you obviously have exacerbations, so what do you do in times like that?
Oh, do you want a microphone?
I think the biggest thing for me is knowing why I exercise and being really clear on that. And I guess the mindset that I'm at now is that I'm really trying to prepare myself to be in the best position to manage whatever the disease throws at me in the future. So it not only is me knowing why I'm exercising, but putting reminders in front of me so that that stays at the forefront of my mind is just crucial. It's also the kind of thing that it's kind of hard to start, but then kind of hard to stop. I was laughing at a few moments during Rory's speech because I felt like it does get addictive, and I could really relate to that, looking for the next thing. But yeah, the more you do it, I think the more that you realise what the benefits are, and it becomes habit, it becomes routine, and then you sort of feel like you can't live without it.
Yeah, I'm probably the same.
Same?
That saying,
Yeah.
Forced habit and doing the right things, and obviously with tricatheter modulators, mindset and that is changing. So exercise now, as much as it is physiotherapy, it's probably a good space to clear my head, running out there on my own and doing things like that to feel good about myself.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you both. Anyone got any questions?
No, I've got a question for Ryan. Yeah. So is there any trials coming out or studies? I don't know, I mean, technically they might not be easy to get approved for, but I'm just looking at a big cohort of people on tricatheter and saying do airway clearance and just carry on as normal and not do airway clearance, and just seeing what's happening over time. Or I guess going forward.
Yeah, so prior to tricatheter, that was the age-old question, and no one dared go close to it because of the risk of causing harm. Look, you probably could now, but I think most of the focus, and we heard a lot this weekend, was about modifying what sort of has always, what traditional airway clearance has been, such as that study from Edinburgh. And that's sort of the purposeful and very strategic, I think, way of doing it. I haven't heard of anyone that's going to look at nothing versus traditional no.
And I just have one other question. With that study looking at viscoelastic properties of mucus, they look like they're all trending in the right direction and they stopped at 12 months. Is that ongoing?
Not that I'm aware of. That was just a... But there's a sense this weekend that if you maintain adherence to the modulators, pancreatic function, the state of mucus in the airways, everything continues to improve, but our data is at best like a year or two or So yeah, more to come, I think.
Oh, of course you do.
I don't want to be accused of being annoying, so... Oh, look, we don't measure free-spirited, but I'd even say it's becoming less. Like, traditionally in CF, there was a lot of free-spiritedness, so we're used to that.
It's a gene we've got.
And that's probably, as Shannon said, my approach is probably different to others. I engage with patients in an annoying fashion to somewhat match their free-spiritedness. Yeah, each patient's different. Something works at this point in time for that patient, and it doesn't for that one, and so you keep persisting. That's why I put that last slide up. As a paediatric physio, we persist to the age of 18, and then we say, someone else persists now. But yeah, it's going back to the drawing board frequently and trying again. And so you tell your friend very sternly that I'll still be there.
Anyone else got any questions from their friends? Yes.
Anyone want to try first?
I'd probably touch on it a little bit there. That mental health stuff now, Trifecta changed my life for really 90% really good ways and then 10% maybe a bit of a different way. So as I said, I'm navigating the mental health thing now and I'll probably go out for a run, maybe not to clear my lungs, but out of force having to make sure my lungs are healthy, but keeping a good mental space and keeping busy in myself and make sure and I still believe in myself even though 90% of me now feels cured. So that's probably why I'm sticking to that.
I'll jump in quickly. A lot of small studies looking at physio and exercise, I can't quote them, but they would have looked at quality of life. And I can think of, again, not quoting any numbers, but quality of life improves with those that do regular exercise from a mental health point of view, as well as bodily functions, all those sorts of things. Your point about the changing, we're always about historically putting weight on, so we would have patients come into hospital and the doctors would say, a bit like back in the older days.
Oh, be careful. Be careful. Excuse Nana up here.
They'd say, can you not exercise this patient for the first week of their admission because we're trying to put the weight on, not... Now we're at the point where a percentage of patients have excessive adipose tissue, and we are saying you most definitely can do more exercise for different reasons, weight loss rather than airway clearance or fitness or things like that. Yeah, you're spot on. And that's the conversation we have weekly, daily with patients. So, and I'll even say before modulators, I'd have discussions with patients and families saying, look, if all you're doing is exercise, I'm actually happy with that. Because if it's going to avoid the burden and the fights and the angst, go for it, go to town. And we would put in a program, and whether it was adhered to or not, as long as you are exercising most days of the week, then I was happy.
Well, thanks so much to our panel. Fantastic talks from you legends and Ryan.
I've annoyed the other host, sorry.
You have. Thank you so much. Afternoon tea will be served in the foyer, and we'll have our closing sessions in P9 and P10. So thank you, everybody.